Hello, this is Watch All About with another watch review, and in this review we are looking at the Spinnaker Cahill, codename SP-5064-02 for this one in particular. So it comes in a variety of colorways, and this one in particular is obviously the green theme, but it also has a IP plated gunmetal case, which as you can see is a nice alternative to a standard stainless steel case, and I think it actually works pretty nicely in this instance. Price of this watch is $350. That equates to around £265. However, if you use my code WIAA20, as in Watch All About 20, that will get you 20% off the Spinnaker website. So that makes it a slightly more attractive $280 or about £215. Now that's pretty reasonable, you know, for a decent automatic watch with sapphire crystal. You know, anything around the £200 mark, I like to think is as cheap as you're likely to get a decent, well-made watch. So this obviously is well within, you know, that kind of price range. So let's discuss it in further detail. First of all, let's have a look at the specs. So if I just pop it on. So size is a pretty chunky 43mm in diameter. So I've got just over a 7-inch wrist for reference. Height is also a pretty tall 15mm, and then a lug-to-lug length of 49mm. So size-wise, you know, it is pretty big. It is on the larger side, 43mm. I think it looks okay on my wrist, to be fair. You know, it's reasonably well turned down with the lugs, so it does hug the wrist nicely, and it doesn't look gigantic, so that's a good thing. The height, 15mm, is a little bit taller than you probably would expect from a watch like this. So it's probably not the kind of watch that you would wear smart, you know, under a cuff or anything like that, because it would be quite difficult to fit it underneath it. Weight is 111 grams, which is actually fairly heavy for a watch on a leather strap. So it does signify, you know, decent quality. Obviously the size equates to more weight as well. So it does feel pretty hefty on the wrist. Water resistance is a very respectable 20 atmospheres or 200 meters, so it is a proper decent diver's watch. You know, you will be able to get pretty far underwater, further than I will ever wish to go down. So that's a good point. And then 22mm lug width, and the strap stays that wide for the whole length of it as well. So pretty thick and a chunky strap to go with the rest of the watch, and I think it works really well. As you can see there, certainly is thick also in terms of, you know, how thick the leather is, but we'll have a look at that in closer detail in a little bit anyway. Finally, 2-year warranty, so you are covered for a good amount of time, and the movement is the Seiko NH35, so that is, you know, a very, very highly regarded, well-used movement across many micro brands and cheaper, more affordable automatic watches. This one, I've put it on my Lepsy watch scope, and it's coming in at a very, very impressive minus 0.5 seconds a day. So that is incredibly accurate. Now, my experience with Spinnaker is, you know, you got to be pretty lucky to get one that accurate. Tends to vary. So in my case, you know, I'm pretty fortunate for this watch that it's come in that accurate. You know, usually I would say plus or minus 10 seconds you'd be looking at. But obviously in this instance, that's wonderful. Some other specs include a sapphire crystal. Now it says it has an anti-reflective coating on, but to be honest, I don't find it too effective. As you can see, you know, looking around in this room I'm in, and I'm getting a fair amount of reflections. And we have a glass bezel insert as well. So they just describe it as glass. So I have a feeling that's probably just mineral crystal. So if you do whack it, it is likely to chip or shatter. So just be careful about that. It looks nice because obviously it's very reflective, and it quite seamlessly goes into the sapphire crystal, as you can see there with this light reflection. So that is quite eye-catching and attractive. However, there is you know, there is a case there where it could potentially get damaged quite easily. Okay, so let's just take it off and we'll have a look at it in closer detail. So starting off with the dial. So first of all, it's got this crosshair in the center, which draws the eyes towards the center of the dial, I think. Works nicely. Same as always with Spinnaker, the logo is just too light. I much prefer, if it's going to be an applied logo, for it to be thicker. As you can see there, it's basically just a sticker. So that's a bit of a shame. When you have logos like this, I oftentimes just think, you might as well just print it on, because when something's that light, it does look a little bit on the cheap side. So that's one downfall. The other applied hour markers, as you can see, are brushed, which is nice introduction of texture to the dial. However, I would have liked to have seen these a little bit deeper as well. Now, that's quite an unusual thing for Spinnaker, because usually their applied hour markers are usually really nice, thick, deep application, good quality, but these are a little bit on the thin side, which I was surprised to see. However, the rest of the dial is pretty neat. Mercedes hand's a little bit boring, to be honest. I would have liked to have seen something a little bit more unique or a little bit more modern, maybe, than the classic Submariner homage styles Mercedes hands. But I like the raised index around the outside as well. That does produce a bit of depth to the dial, and then a neat border around the date as well works pretty well. I like green as well. Nice to have something different to the usual black or blue options. So this is, you don't see green options too often. So if you are after a green watch, then this would be a very good one for you to consider. So I think in reality, the dial, it looks pretty good. However, there's a few things there that I would have liked to have seen different, namely deeper application of applied elements and maybe a different handset. So moving on to the case, I mentioned already our glass insert of the bezel. The bezel itself, really nice action on it. There is a little bit of wiggle there, but not too much. However, it's really firm and provides a really nice noise as well when you do rotate it. Lume on the watches is actually fairly average. I'll show you a lume shot now, but also you can see with me holding it up just in daylight, you can see the lume poking through there, and that's had no chance to charge either, so that's pretty impressive. So that's a great big plus. Certainly you don't necessarily imagine watches costing around £200 or $280-ish to have that impressive lume, but in this case it is definitely above average, so that's a good plus for it. So the bezel has a decent grip around it, nice and easy to use. Moving on to the case, so I mentioned it's a gunmetal IP plated. Again, a pleasant alternative to standard stainless steel, and I think I prefer this to DLC as well. DLC tends to be jet black, whereas this is a pretty funky mix between the two, sort of like just a darker stainless steel, which works really well in this instance, and it offsets the green pretty nicely as well. The crown, as you can see here, has the Spinnaker logo very lightly engraved on the end. It is nice and easy to use though, thanks to the grip, and I think in terms of size, it's pretty reasonable size. It's not too ugly or sticky outy. The ratio is pretty good. Moving on to the case back, it's obviously exhibition, so it does show off the Seiko movement nicely. You can see the movement, and the bridges have all just got a pretty standard brushed bridge to them. So nothing too exceptional in terms of looks, but I still like to see movements no matter what they look like. And we can see here that Spinnaker have added a sticker to the rotor as well to provide a little bit of customization, which is good. These details are very lightly engraved around the outside also. So moving on to the, just worth mentioning actually, we've got the Spinnaker logo. Pretty nice and deeply engraved on the side there. So it doesn't bother me. Some people think, oh, that's a bit of an eyesore. However, it doesn't really bother me. It's quite subtle, and at least it is nice and deep and pretty well engraved. Moving on to the strap. So this strap is waterproof, and it's described as a vintage style. So you can see here we have a very rustic kind of top grain. It is easy to mark, as you can see, but that provides a fair amount of charm and character to the strap. I really do like thick, chunky straps like this, and it is excellent quality. Very, very comfortable, very soft as well. And it's nice to have this little bit of stitching detailing as well. So the keeper loops, also rustic and neatly done. And finally, moving on to the buckle, here we have the Spinnaker. First of all, the shape of it is a pretty nice, sort of like a cushion kind of shape. A little bit different to a standard Tang buckle. And then we have the Spinnaker logo deeply engraved on the top bar there. So let's get the macro lens on and have a look at it in even closer detail. So starting off with the dial. So here we can see the logo very lightly applied, and moving on to our other application. There's the 12, 11 and 10. You can see here, if I can get a sort of angled shot, it's a bit difficult, but you can see the depth could be a little bit deeper in my eyes. So we can also see a very slight texture to the base as well, which is a pleasant, nice bit of texture to the dial. And moving on to the hands, we've got a brushed finish to match the numerals. There we have it. And then our second hand also brushed with our loom pip there. Moving on to our date window, pretty straightforward, cut out with a little painted border around it. And then moving on to our index ring. You can see there we've got plenty of loom on those bits as well. And it's good that it's raised. And then moving on to our bezel insert, you can see the glass top and our painted loom markings below. Flipping it over, see the grip on our bezel, pretty easy to use. And moving on to the finishing of our actual case. So the finishing of the case is pretty average, nothing too extraordinary. Here's our crown. As you can see, the logo is lightly engraved on the end there. And we have this little channel as well, bit of detailing there, which keeps things interesting. Onto the other side, we have the Spinnaker logo. As you can see, is deep and accurately engraved. And finally, on the case, flipping it over to the case back, here's some of our details surrounding the exhibition window, all deeply engraved. And finally, let's take a look at the movement. So this is the sticker on our rotor. Nothing too exciting about that, but it's still nice to see that they've made a little bit of effort. And if I just flip it over, be able to see the balance wheel ticking away. You can see a little bit of, I don't know, dust or something underneath the exhibition window there, as you can see just there. So that's interesting to spot. And then we have our brushed bridges as well. So everything's, as it should be really with the movement, nothing untoward. And then finally moving on to the straps. So you can see a really nice rustic, soft top grain there. Stitching on the sides. And then moving down to this little bit of detailing at the bottom, double stitch there. Pretty thick, nicely done. And on the underside we have this waterproof kind of seal on the bottom. Spinnaker logo there stamped on the bottom. And finally, we have the Spinnaker logo engraved on the top bar of the Tang buckle as well. And you can see here we've got our shapely side as well. Okay. So, as is always the case for Spinnaker, they've put out a pretty decent watch for a pretty reasonable price. Let me just give it a quick wipe. There's certain things, that I probably would have liked to have seen slightly differently, as I've mentioned before. Handset, it's a bit boring. Something else would have been nice to see. But also the depth of the applied elements on the dial. But in reality, for the price, it's actually a really, really decent, well-constructed watch. Personally, I think Spinnaker have better options. I think they have different watches which look a little bit more interesting to the eye and are better constructed. However, you know, if you are after a decent diver watch which is green, then I think this would be a really, really good option for you to consider. Me personally, I would choose something different. For instance, the Bradner compressor is a more interesting alternative, I think. However, there's no denying that this is a pretty decent watch for the money. So this was the Spinnaker Cahill, and that's what it's all about. So thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you around. See you next time. Bye-bye.